Right, it is just coming up to, 6 minutes after 7 now, and we're on the brink of a recession, beset by a labour shortage, staring down the barrel of tens of thousands of dollars in extra mortgage repayments when we go to refix. Ooh, 2023, it's going to be great, isn't it? John Key, ANZ Chair and former Prime Minister, is about to tell us just how bad he thinks things will get next year. But forget about all of that for a second, just for a second. Let's go to the Royal Auckland and Grange Golf Club on Friday afternoon, where the former Prime Minister did this.
Oh, Johnny!
Like, looking at the reaction, I thought we've just won a war or something. It's out of control. Good morning, how are you? Yeah, what was that like?
Oh, Brady thinks I'm just a show pony. You know, couldn't do it when no one else was around. You had to do it with the crowd, cameras on, you know. Yeah, it was unbelievable, yeah.
Great day.
The weird thing was that there were so many weird things about that day, but firstly, you know, whenever any golfer that stands in front of a par 3 always thinks, I'm going to hit it in the hole. But I was so nervous about missing the ball with everyone around me that I thought, oh, God, for goodness sake, don't do something terrible here. So I wasn't even thinking about that. So when it hit the green, they were making all that noise. I didn't even look at it going in. I went over to pick up my tee. When they went nuts, I thought, why are these people going crazy for me hitting the green? Then all of a sudden I thought, oh, it must be in the hole. And it was just by then they were just going crazy. So.
It certainly was. They were mad scenes.
Yeah, it was fun.
Very good. All right, well, I'm glad you're having some fun. But next year doesn't sound like much fun for the country, for the economy. What is your prediction here? I mean, I've just looked at the IMF growth forecast overnight. The weakest growth profile since 2001, excluding the GFC and COVID. So it's not looking great, is it?
It's got to get worse. I'll tell you why it's got to get worse. Interest rates have risen a lot this year, and they're going to go up more next year. So if you think about it at ANZ, we wrote a mortgage, say, in February of this year, 3.2%. Today, if you came in, 6.4%, let's say. Next year higher. So, you know, if you borrowed $1 million, not unreasonable, lots of people do, you were paying, let's say, broadly, you know, simple terms, $35K a year for that. Now you'll be paying $65, $70. So that's a lot of money for people, you know, in post-tax income. Second thing is that at ANZ, half of all of our mortgage holders have a mortgage that either has a 2 or a 3 in front of it, and it rolls off over the next wee while. So you not only have the people who are coming in to try and buy a house, you've got everybody that's existing, and then that feeds into rents and everything else.
Which means that we're all going to be paying more for our mortgages and less on other stuff, which means that we will see economic activity slow and domestic consumption slow, right? That we understand.
Yeah.
First of all, do you agree with the Reserve Bank about the recession call? And how will it feel for your average Kiwi family, a recession that would happen like next year?
Yeah, so, I mean, basically, if you think about inflation, the Reserve Bank's, you know, look, it has a number of different things these days, but basically the guts of what it's there to do is keep inflation between 1% and 3%. So it has to sort of slay the inflation dragon. And for 30 years, that's been, they've done that, and they've done that well. And now it's a bit out of control. So the problem you've got is, while everyone's celebrating, you know, these pretty big wage rounds that are going through, to the Reserve Bank, they'll just sit there and say, actually, incomes are rising, so they're not going to react as quickly as we want. So I saw something the other day, said, look, they're trying to basically land an Airbus A380 on a postage stamp. And you've got to really get into recession to stop that. And just to give you one example, at ANZ, we've gone away, and we're big, you know, we're sort of 40% of the market, roughly. We see a lot of source income. So from the start of this year to the end of the year, the average income, what we see going into their pay packet, into their bank account every week, has gone up by 6.7% on average. So the Reserve Bank is fighting against, you know, while they're effectively taking money out of the system with higher interest rates, more money of fuel is coming onto the fire. So that helps things, but it means that it probably goes on for longer. So, you know, the RBNZ's got a tough job.
So to what extent does the fact that tourism's opening back up and we're going to have all of these tourists flooding in, spending their money and the tills will be ringing, as we're trying to stop spending our money, That obviously makes life for the Reserve Bank a lot harder. To what extent will that have an impact? And immigration too. I mean, we just saw yesterday another announcement about opening the doors.
Yeah.
How much of an effect will those things have on the recession fears with the Reserve Bank's job?
Well, the migration changes are good, but they're about a year late. I mean, the reality is if you go to a restaurant, half the reason why you can't get a booking these days isn't because they're completely full. It's because they can't get the staff, actually. And that's kind of tragic, isn't it? You know, you're running a little business. All you want to do is basically rebuild the coffers after a couple of terrible years with COVID, and you actually stop from operating. And that's true across every sort of business. So, you know, they're opening up the gates, if you like, for a few bits and pieces. But realistically, they're a year behind the 8 ball here. And, you know, the only reason they're doing that is because, bluntly, the Labour Party are controlled by the unions, and the unions have wanted to stop Labour coming in because they believe that'll force the price of labour up, wages up.
Which it has, right?
It has, but then it's caused inflation. So the very people, I mean, you know, I think I was listening to you the other day saying get $30 for being a barista. Great, if that $30 is worth what it was a year or two ago.
Yeah.
But if it's inflated away and you're paying $7 for a coffee, well,
what's the point of it?
What's the point?
Can we talk about China very quickly? Because they have been, and I know you've got a keen interest in China, dismantling slowly, weirdly, but quite quickly their zero COVID approach after some protests. Were you surprised to see Beijing respond like that to the protests?
Yes and no. Look, I mean, zero COVID doesn't work, right? And the reason it doesn't work is because, as we know in New Zealand, Omicron is very easy to pass on, to transmit. And so, you know, once you get one case, you're going to get it. And they had these things going on, and they have had, you know, really tough lockdown. And so that's just, you know, smashed their economy. And on top of that, they've also got a housing market themselves, which has got real pressure, and a few other things going on. So at some point, they were going to have to react. I think they've got different issues. Bluntly, actually, their vaccine hasn't worked very well.
No.
I think they had a lot.
And people don't trust it.
And the president had a lot invested with zero COVID pre the Congress. And I think they wouldn't want those protests to really, you know, get out of control. So I wasn't 100% surprised they reacted.
All right, and obviously it's good for us when the more they open up, the better we do, right?
Our biggest market.
Yeah, cool. And tourism too is the other thing. As an ANZ chair, obviously, what are the banks doing to prepare for next year? How Armageddon scenario are they getting?
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, firstly, you don't forget recessions do come and go, right? So a recession depends on how severe it is. So a recession is defined as 2 quarters of negative growth. So you can get mild ones like that, and you can get very deep and extreme ones. The most extreme, the Great Depression, 87 was pretty bad. I actually thought personally, and I got it wrong, I thought COVID would be, but of course governments poured in so much money and the Reserve Bank printed, $90 odd billion worth of cash. So they sort of offset that, but now we're sort of paying for that.
Overcooked it a little bit, eh?
Yeah, like a lot. But anyway, fine. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, I think what we do at the bank is we are obviously cautious, right? So we lend to, I know this sounds really crazy, but we lend to people, we don't lend to houses. So when you come into us and you say, this house is worth $1 million, I got $300,000 worth of equity, I want to borrow 700 grand. Yes, of course, we look at it and say, okay, we want to make sure that you can, that we don't lose our money so the thing doesn't go, through the floor. But we worry mostly about, can you pay us back? Because we don't want to have a mortgagee sale. In fact, we've had virtually none of them over the last 3 or 4 years. In fact, all the banks had a moratorium on them during COVID. And no one's going to be rushing to wind people up. We always say the same thing. Ring us, ring our contact centre, go to the branch, speak to people, and we'll find a way through to help you through all this. But we do test you, and so that's what causes the problem is that if a mortgage is 6.5%, what we really say is, can you afford that mortgage at 8.5%, 9%, just in case it's
So where do you think the banks will be testing? Where would their testing level need to be?
I can tell you it's in the mid-8s at the moment.
Okay, and how high could that go?
Well, it goes about 2 and a bit percent every time, above where basically we lend a mortgage, which is about 2 and a bit percent above where the Reserve Bank actually have base rates.
So we're well into double digits next year.
Well, I think we're going to have floating rates very close to 10%. I think people will be writing mortgages yes, got to believe they're going to have a 7 in front of them. I mean, the reality is that, basically the Reserve Bank has indicated that there's more tightening coming, and our economist thinks base rates go to, the official cash rate, 5.75%. You can do the maths.
Yeah.
You add on a bit.
So house prices then, where does that leave house prices? ANZ's latest prediction was an 18% drop from, top to trough.
Yeah. I think this is the funny thing with the kind of recessionary talk is it depends on what you do. Like, let's say take your job. You don't face a recession. Whether it's good or bad out there, you're doing what you're doing, and you'll always be doing it because people want you and all that sort of stuff. That's cool. If you, for instance, are in the housing or construction sector, it could get rough. I mean, of the liquidations in the last few months, a quarter of them have all been in housing. And house prices actually pulled back a lot. They've either stopped and they've come back. So I think my own personal view on housing is that it doesn't really go through the floor. And I'll tell you why, is that in the end we need a stock of housing. I mean, to your point, migration is going to change. The settings for that will change. Eventually, young people always want to buy a property. I mean, people need to rent properties. So there's a natural flaw. And the other thing is that building costs are going up. They're not going down.
This is true.
The only part that could possibly go down is labour costs. I don't see that really much. So the point is that eventually builders are just going to say, which is exactly what's happening at the moment, they're saying, OK, I can produce this house for X, I can't sell it for Y, therefore I just won't build it. And I think what you'll see over the next 12 months is the freeze frame in terms of building and new supply coming on the market. And then what you know is this thing is always time delayed. So then 12 months or 18 months on,
you see the prices start. The age-old story. Hey, thank you so much for coming in.
No problem.
Where are you going for Christmas?
We are going to Hawaii, But we're here actually for Christmas. Steffi's coming home.
Oh, nice.
So it's sort of, family Christmas. So at the moment it's a lot of snow in London because my niece has been trying to get out of Heathrow for a few days. It's been pretty tough,
Terrible
actually.
weather there. Hey, thank you so much for coming in. Merry Christmas to you and the family. And people like hearing from you, so it's good to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you.
18 minutes after 7 o'clock, former Prime Minister Sir John Key.